What's up, YTPC? This is DSG Pipe Smoker with another pipe smoking video, and today I am doing a tobacco review of Penzance. And yes, this is an empty jar. I'll get to that in a minute. Penzance is a Balkan blend from the Esoterica line. It is an extremely hard to get blend. I was fortunate enough to be gifted this along with more Esoterica blends from Heisenberg 067 for the purposes of reviewing it. So here we are reviewing Penzance. Really starting off with Penzance. Penzance is comprised of Latakia, Orientals, Turkish, and Virginia. Because of the Oriental presence being so much more forward than the Latakia, though, this is definitely a Balkan blend. I know that sometimes there can be, a lot of confusion or a lot of arguments about whether or not a blend is an English blend or a Balkan blend. I would consider it a Balkan blend if the Orientals are more forward than the Latakia, and they definitely are in this case. Now, let's get to why the tin's empty, or why the jar's empty. Obviously, I smoked all of the tobacco. However, we're now getting into the part where I talk about appearance and aroma. I obviously can't do that because I don't have any left, and I didn't do a separate video to add to this video on the appearance and the aroma. I'm really sorry about that, guys. I usually include it in the review, and I completely spaced on it. I'm really sorry about that. So, but what I can do, I literally just got done smoking this tobacco about 20 minutes ago. Actually, I smoked it in this blend. And I left some of the ash in there to do the rest of the review. So, but anyway, having just smoked it, or having just smoked the last bit of it, and having smoked it for a little bit now, about a week or so, maybe a little bit over a week, I did get to see the appearance and get a good jar aroma. Initially, when I opened the jar, I said that it had influences of Syrian and Cyprian Latakia, based off of the aroma, but having worked with it a little bit here, I would say that it's definitely more of a Cyprian influence as far as aroma goes. It's definitely that campfire smokiness, but there's also more of a dried earth kind of smell. As far as appearance, usually Penzance comes in pressed flakes, and when I got the tobacco, there were flakes, but it was mostly just the flakes that were broken up. And when the tobacco is broken up, it's broken up in this fine, rough cut. It's about the best I can describe it. It's definitely not a ribbon cut like like most flakes. Think the Orlick Dark Strong Kentucky or the Orlick Golden Slice. It doesn't come like that. It comes more as a pressed, almost like a cake that's been thinly sliced. That being said, the tobacco was obviously not under a lot of pressure, or it wasn't under pressure for very long, because the flakes were very light when you go to pick them up, in that they were very easy to rub out, especially if you weren't careful. It's not like a cake where you had to get a knife out and cut a piece off and then rub it real hard in your hands. It wasn't like that at all. You had to be very gentle with this tobacco if you wanted to smoke it in flake form. I did not. I rubbed out any flakes that came with the blend that I got in a sample size, and I just used, of course, the rest of the tobacco in there that was already rubbed out. As far as the color of the tobacco, it was mostly dark brown with some black to it. There were specks of lighter tobaccos, but it was a predominantly dark tobacco, especially a little bit more closer to being black in appearance, but there were specks of dark brown, or at least there was a lot of influence of dark brown. Getting into smoking mechanics, though, with the exception of the 320, it smoked, or smoking it in the 320, it smoked well in the pipes that I did smoke it in. In all of the other pipes that I smoked it in, lit fairly well, didn't need much relights, and even when I did need to relight it, it relit pretty well, fairly easily. I did have to be careful not to overpack it, though, because, and I'm not saying it's difficult to pack, it's just the nature of the cut. It's easy to overpack it because it tends to want to clump back into that flake form once it's already been rubbed out. When I smoked it in the 320, I had difficulty getting it to light at first, but once I got it lit, it was pretty good. And when I got it lit, I only really needed one pipe cleaner to dry out the bottom of the chamber as I was smoking down. Maybe two, on the 320 at least. So I would say that if you're going to smoke this in a larger bowl, or maybe more specifically the 320, make sure that it's a little bit on the drier side. When I received this tobacco, it was, I would say, average moisture, maybe a little bit wetter than average, but it wasn't that big of a deal. At least I didn't experience to be that big of a deal. It's a medium to full-bodied flavor, about a medium to full-bodied body to it. It's a little redundant. It's a medium to full body, medium to full flavor. It's a little bit better, right? No nicotine hit, no tongue bite. Absolutely no tongue bite. And I'm pretty sensitive to tongue bite, especially this time of year when I'm relatively dehydrated. Additionally, the smoke was a little bit thicker than normal, or at least normal pipe tobacco, but it wasn't quite chewy. It wasn't quite on the same level as like what a lot of the heavier Latakia blends will produce. Or like what a lot of tobaccos that have black Cavendish will have. They tend to produce a lot of thick, chewy smoke as well. Burn time was about average, so if you're smoking this in an average size bowl, like this pipe, or where did I put it? Here it is. Or this Bones, Boom Paul, about 45 minutes, give or take. Oh, the ash. I knew that's why I was saving this. The ash on this tobacco burns to a very fine, white, slightly lighter colored grade. Those black specks are from tobacco that were sticking to the bowl and fell off from handling the pipe towards the end of my smoking this. And as far as removing the ash is concerned, I really only had to do that in the 320, but the 320 has a pretty big bowl to it. All of the other pipes I smoked it out of didn't have that issue. And speaking of the other pipes that I smoked it out of, these two pipes, as far as flavor goes, smoked it best. They really brought out the Latakia in the blend. They gave it more of a fuller bodied feel, and it mixed well with the Orientals, which were still at the forefront, even in these two pipes. My P5 and my 320. However, when I smoked it in a more conical bowl, such as my Artisan pipe here, which has a little bit more of a conical bowl. I don't think you can see that because of the shadow that the chamber's casting. But in that kind of a bowl, it started out a little bit smoky, or at least along the same level as these other two pipes at first, but then at about the halfway point, the Orientals got stronger and stronger, and the Latakia just sort of dissipated more and more until you were left with pretty much the Orientals and towards the bottom. In this pipe, the Orientals were present or predominant at first, but towards the last third or so of the bowl, the Latakia really shined through. So that's typical of a Balkan blend. I would say that if you have a tobacco pipe that you dedicate to Latakia and or Balkan blends, that would be the pipe to dedicate this tobacco to. As far as the flavor profile goes, and this is true for all but the conical bowl, on the draw, I got a lot of floral notes, and when I say floral, I don't necessarily mean like a flower. Think more along vegetation kind of floral. Kind of a green vegetation floral, like what you would smell if it were a summer day, like an early summer day, maybe a late spring when everything's starting to bloom. That kind of vegetation, that green vegetation, only maybe a little bit more fermented. I also got a little bit of woodiness behind that, and every so often I got this tanginess to the tobacco. And that was on the draw, that was as you were pulling the tobacco in. In addition to that, the Latakia did have an influence on the tobacco on the draw. Not necessarily smoky. That came more on the finish, more on that later though. But it did have this heavier, darker feel to it. In other words, if this blend was a more Virginia forward blend with just the Orientals added to it, even if the Orientals had as much of an influence in a straight Virginia blend or a Virginia forward blend, the Virginias would still give this kind of bright feel to it. And in this blend, even in the draw, it was a more darker, heavier feel to it, but still very pleasant. On the finish, though, the Latakia was definitely present, and it was definitely smoky. However, it was a very rich smokiness. It felt a lot more refined and a lot more smooth. Not that Latakia is necessarily rough to begin with, it's just this is a different kind of Latakia, and you can tell that the Latakia that they use, actually really the whole blend, but particularly the Latakia that the Esoterica line uses, is a very refined, possibly aged Latakia to it. It's just, like I said, very rich, nice smoky texture to it, very smooth texture to it, to the smoke. A good all-around smoky profile on the draw. On the finish. Additionally, and this is the only pipe tobacco that I've noticed this happening. I don't usually notice this unless it's a cigar that's, fairly oily. But I did get kind of an aftertaste to it, kind of a mouth coating with this Penzance blend. And that coating gave kind of this charred wood and deep cocoa flavor. And the cocoa flavor was in the background. It was just a hint of the cocoa. It was predominantly a charred wood taste, which went excellent with the pipe tobacco, especially being a Balkan blend with that Latakia and the Orientals influencing it. Now, earlier in the review, I mentioned that there were some Virginias. I did not notice the Virginias in the flavor, in the aroma, and I might have seen specks of them in the flake, but other than that, I didn't notice it. If you had told me that there were no Virginias in the blend, I believe you. I just didn't notice their presence. I noticed predominantly the Orientals, followed by the Latakia presence. And that's my review of it. My conclusion is this is an amazing tobacco. It really is. I can totally see why, there's a hype around it. And normally, if a tobacco is hard to get, it's not going to make my top 3. Because, what's the point of, having a favorite tobacco that's extremely hard to get if you can't procure it, right? But this is justifiably hard to get. It is that good. It is that amazingly good. I understand that there are some people who say, well, it's a pretty good tobacco, but it's not the best. I would like to try the tobaccos that some people say that, are better than Penzance, because if it can beat out Penzance, it's one hell of a tobacco. Penzance is that good. It's an incredible Balkan blend. And if you haven't tried it, at least my own personal opinion is it's definitely worth trying. So, that's been the review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys are having a great weekend. My next review will be Tilbury, another Esoterica blend, and a gift from Olberg. Again, I hope you guys are having a great weekend. This has been DSG Pipe Smoker with another pipe smoking video. You guys have a good day.